Okay.
Is this thing on?
Hi. Good evening.
Good evening, Deena.
Good evening.
Deena.
Thank you so much for coming
Thank you for being here.
to my 7th Jerusalem encounter. Yay! It's really, really wonderful to see you here. And I hope that it will be a interesting and fun evening. What do I want to say? Okay, so first of all, I want to thank Gila. Gila is the owner of Nagila. That's one of the reasons it's called Nagila. Gila, את רק רוצה להגיד שלום? That's Gila. She opened up Nagila around 6-7 months ago, and she'll actually get up and talk for a few minutes about her decision to open up this restaurant. So we really appreciate that they're hosting us here tonight. I just want to thank, even though he's not here, Michael Dickel, who lent this sound system to me. And Dana Laura Levine, who's photographing the evening, just as a friendly gesture, which I appreciate very, very much. Thank you. And Stephanie Jonah, who organized this with me. And the authors, I also really appreciate that they're here, and I'll introduce each of them before they speak. So this evening, besides it being an authors and restaurateur evening, which I don't know how to pronounce, it also is the official launching of my website, JerusalemEncounters.com. And I'm very, very excited about it. Thank you. I really hesitated opening it. I guess any of you who have tried to fulfill dreams know that it's really terrifying, and so I really hesitated. But then I decided, with some push, that it's time for me to do it. Hi, Deena. Jerusalem Encounters, please visit the website, because it is like the launch, so it's really important that you take a look. It's about moving cultural events that connect people to each other and to Jerusalem in a meaningful way. And tonight, one of the goals of this evening is to introduce Jerusalemites to an establishment in Jerusalem, one that's actually struggling. And you're all tasting the food and it's delicious, but it's really, really hard running a business in Jerusalem. It's not simple at all, which David, the owner of Tmol Shilshom, can also attest to. And so you guys being here is actually showing support to somebody who's trying to fulfill a dream in Jerusalem. Also, just in the paper that you got when you came in, there's also information about my upcoming event, which is on November 26th at Tmol Shilshom. The schedule is already full, even though it was already full 2 weeks before the event, with amazing, amazing people who are going to be talking about their travels around the world. It should be really fun, so you guys should come to that. And that's it about me. And Gila, at Mukhana. Okay, so I'm inviting Gila up to speak about her restaurant and what made her decide to open it and all that stuff. So Gila, please.
אני חייבת לדבר נראה לי שומעים. לא שומעים? אוקיי. שלום לכולם. אני מאוד שמחה לארח אתכם במסעדה שלנו. אני לא יודעת מאיפה להתחיל, כאילו כל העניין של מסעדה בעצם היה מאוד מפתיע, גם אותי. אני באה בכלל מתחום החינוך, אני גננת ומורה לכיתות א'-ב'.
Can you guys hear? Deena, can you hear?
ואחר כך למדתי התעמלות, חינוך גופני, אז אני גם מורה לספורט, ואחר כך גם למדתי שיאצו, אם אתם יודעים מה זה, שזה טיפול עם לחיצות. ואחרי הבת מצווה של הבת שלי הקטנה, זאת אומרת, ביררנו על כל מיני קייטרינג, והם סיפרו לי מה שהם הולכים לתת לי, ואמרתי, וואי, אבל אני מבשלת הרבה יותר טעים, ואני יכולה לעשות עוד 20 סלטים יותר ממה שהם מציעים לי. כי אצלי שבת זה חייב להיות עם שולחן ערוך, עם מלא מלא סלטים, זה התענוג של שבת שלי, זה הארוחה עם החלות שאני מכינה. וככה התחיל בעצם הסיפור של אוכל החוצה. אחרי שעשינו את הקייטרינג ל-80 איש, לבת, באה חברה וביקשה קייטרינג לבת שלה, לבת מצווה שלה. ומפה לשם הדברים התגלגלו ואמרנו, טוב, אז אולי נשנה מקצוע, נעשה משהו אחר. אז אמרנו, טוב, אולי נעשה רק טק-אווי בשוק. ולא מצאנו מה שרצינו בשוק. והלכתי לטייל עם הבת הנהדרת שלי, פה חנת, חנת תגידי שלום. טיילנו בעיר וטיילנו באזור השכונות פה בשוק, ונכנסנו לפה, היה רשום להשכרה, ונכנסתי למקום הזה ואמרתי, זה המקום. והוא לא היה נראה ככה, זה היה חדר שכולו היה ארונות מסביב. תחשבו שכל הקירות האלה מלאות בארונות עם עדפים, כי זה היה חליפות לגבר, ליברטי קראו לחנות, הכל היה חליפות לגבר. פשוט התאהבתי במקום ונכנסתי לאטרף, ואני עד היום בעצם שוחה, כי אף פעם לא ידעתי מה זה להקים מסעדה, או מה זה להיות אשת עסקים וכאלה, אבל אנחנו מתמודדים. וזהו, אז תהנו, ברוכים הבאים, וטוב לראותכם.
Okay, so now we're going to start with the authors. The way it's going to work is that each author has around 15-20 minutes that they're going to be reading and speaking about their books from a personal perspective. And then there will be time for questions for each author individually. And in between each author, there's going to be around a 10-minute break. Okay, you guys ready? Okay. In here you've got the official bios of the authors, but I've decided that I'm going to introduce them in a personal way, since this is about being personal this evening. And so the first author that's going to be speaking is David Ehrlich. He's the owner of Tmol Shilshom, which is a very important restaurant establishment in Jerusalem, which has been around for 20 years. They just celebrated their 20-year anniversary. He also writes very kind of sweet. I feel like they're sweet. Actually, they're not all sweet. Short stories. Mainly in Hebrew, but he's had some short stories translated and put into a book in English. And as most of you probably know, I guess the main venue where I run events is at Tmol Shilshom. And I guess in a nutshell, it's because David is wonderful. And so, without further ado, here you go.
Shalom lekulam. It's going to be in English, don't worry, but I'll do a little bit in Hebrew. First of all, I want to say that I'm so used to be on that side of the operation, and as Deena so well has put it so well, it's a struggle. It's never simple. Unlike other countries, this country and specifically this city is not necessarily very supportive of small businesses, and it's always a struggle. So Gila, Batzlacha. I feel terrible that I haven't been here sitting you open. This has been my first time, and I'm sitting here for free, so that's terrible, but I'll come tomorrow for lunch. And you know what? I've been there for 20-something years with a very well-known business. I'm very lucky and this and that. And yet I've been struggling just like you are. I have bigger debts than you do. So when you're done with lunch at Nagila, maybe you want to come for dinner at Tmol Shilshom. Here's where my heart is. I used to be a journalist for many years, and then I realized when I worked for Haaretz, for the weekly magazine, that I love writing stories. A magazine story is a story, and it took me a while to realize that. And then I thought, if I am writing stories, might as well create a story. So it's been a long path. I have only 15 minutes, so I have to pack it up real quick. And I want to apologize since I've got my own restaurant. I will not be able to stay for the other writers. I'll have to run into my own restaurant. You have no idea what a headache it is to run a restaurant. So I want to read the first story, which is very, very short. Don't worry. First in Hebrew and then in English. בסדר? I know it's a challenge for some of you, but חכו. קוראים לזה אי ירוק. Green Island. Bear with me. אי ירוק. איש אחד אימץ לעצמו אי תנועה ושתל בו גינה נחמדה עם פרחים אדומים וכחולים, שיחים קטנים וקצת דשא. זה בגלל שהוא גר בדירה מדכאת, בלי מרפסת, בלי חצר, בלי כלום. אמנם הוא לא היה בדיוק הטיפוס שיעשה מעשה כל כך נועז, אבל מרוב צורך והרגע הוא עשה את זה. כל כך הוא רצה גינה. הייתה לו כמעט שנה של נחת. כמה כיף היה לעלות על בגדי עבודה ולעבוד בגינה שלו. הרגיז אותו שהיו אנשים שחשבו שהוא משוגע או גרוע מזה, פרייר, שכאילו מתנדב בשביל העירייה. ובכל זאת היה לו כל כך הרבה סיפוק שהכל היה שווה. עד שעלו על זה. באו מהמחלקה לשיפור פני העיר ושאלו מה הוא חושב שהוא עושה שם. כנראה הבשינו עליו. אחרת בחיים הם לא היו שמים לב. הוא התעצל, הסביר, טען שבסך הכל זה עושה טוב לכולם. שום דבר לא עזר. הודיעו לו שאם עוד פעם יתפסו אותו מגנן בהתנועה, יפסחו אותו. ובתוך שבוע כיסו לו הכל באספלט, ואת האספלט צבעו בירוק, ונגמר הסיפור. So here's my book in English. It's called Who Will Die Last? Stories of Life in Israel. And it has translations from both my books in Hebrew. The first one is called Tmol Shilshom. I'm not marketing myself because it's out of print. And guess what? Kachol 18, which I've just read for you from, is also out of print. But I have a confession. I don't think it's out of print because the 2,000 something have been sold. I think, I think they killed whatever was left. I think I sold only shredded. I think they shredded it. So let me tell you.
Raise the value of the other ones.
Let me tell you, it's impossible to run a restaurant, but it's even harder to be a writer. Green Island. There was a guy who adopted a traffic island. He planted a nice garden with red and blue flowers, small bushes, and a little bit of grass. He did it because he lived in a gloomy apartment. No balcony, no courtyard, nothing at all. It's not that he was such a daring person. He did it because he just wanted a garden. For almost a year, he had a good time. It was so much fun to climb into overalls and work in that garden. It annoyed him that there were people who thought he was crazy, or worse, a sucker. שזה fire בגרסה המקורית. A sucker, volunteering to do an act of public service. But he was having such a great time. It was all worthwhile. Until they found out about it. They came from the Municipal Department of Civic Works to ask Just what he thought he was doing there. Somebody must have read it on him. Otherwise, they would have never noticed. He apologized, explained, claimed he really made things better for everyone, but nothing helped. They said that if they caught him gardening on the traffic island again, well, if he didn't cut it out, they would cut it down. And within a week, they covered the whole thing with asphalt and painted the asphalt green. End of story. Isn't that a typical Israeli story? So I want to read for you another very, very Israeli story, and I'm sure you're gonna agree with me. And it's called To the Limit. It's almost as bad as the mic at Tmol Shilshom. To the Limit. I left a meeting in Ashkelon at 3:30, and at the first intersection, a red Lantis tried to pass me on the right. Usually, I let people pass instead of getting into a fight, but this guy pissed me off. In the side view mirror, I could see his gaudy orange shirt and gelled hair, and so I kept going fast. I was not letting this guy in. When his lane ended, he had no choice but to get in behind me. He didn't leave it at that, the bastard, and wanted me to move out of his way. Yeah, right. Next, he tried to pass on the left, but that wasn't in the cards. In the left lane, a bus was right behind me, so he ended up stuck behind the bus. I could see, even from a distance, how much this burned him. I knew he wasn't really in a hurry, that something inside him was rushing. So I didn't let him pass me on the right nor left. He kept trying and pushing at all the exits all the way to Tel Aviv, and I didn't let him. We did kind of a dance on the highway. Even though I needed to get off at Ginot, he pissed me off so much that I decided to continue one more exit north. This time I did it to spite him. Slowed down, and every time he came to pass me, sped up. I was tired of the game, but I was trapped. So I continued one more exit north. Just to show him one last time. We almost had an accident on the exit ramp, and when he finally started honking, other drivers started to notice our little happening. But what could I do? מה יכולתי לעשות? I felt I had an obligation. Called my wife and told her I was held up at work. We continued until the country club exit, where we got off to take a leak. We parked close enough not to break contact, but far enough apart not to have to speak, and we kept track of each other in the bathroom. Then we went back to our cars, pulled out at exactly the same time, and continued that way to the pancake place, בית הפנקק, אם אתם מכירים, where we stopped to eat. Just because you're suffering from road rage on the highway doesn't mean you have to stay hungry. By then, we could already read each other and knew we were going with this to the limit. So, we sat at the same table. Afterward, we got up and left at the same time and gave, wow, what a show all the way to Haifa. We freaked everyone out with our tires screeching. But I managed not to get distracted by the good feeling I developed for him in the pancake place. I focused on my anger at this idiot was holding me up for so long on the road. And I remember that all of it was because he had tried to pass me on the right. נכון שאתם יודעים משהו על נהגים ישראלים? We continued like this for another hour, which got more difficult with the traffic jams in Haifa. But we were obliged to continue. From checkpoint north, we crawled past a few exits side by side. He was ahead in the left lane, or I was ahead in the right lane, each time waving hello. When we got out of the Krayot suburbs, things became easier, but also more dangerous on the two-lane road. In my excitement, I forgot how the road went, and boom, we hit the northern border. The country ended. And we stood there gasping beside the cars. We knew it would never be this good again. So I have to say something about writing very, very short stories. The good news, it's my art, it's what I love best, it's what I feel I do well. The bad news, nobody appreciates it. Nobody wants to buy books of short stories except 3 people that I know personally. But you can't get anywhere from selling your books to 3 people. Whenever I contact publishers, and I do, they tell, like the first thing they tell me, this very important, very highly appreciated publisher the other day said to me when I talked to her about my next book, which I have on my computer, said to me, סיפורים קצרים? אני חושב שהפלטפורמה של זה האינטרנט היום. Short stories? No, I don't think we're interested. I think the best platform is the internet. So it's a very frustrating, difficult thing to do. I gave a lecture at Tmol Shilshom recently about, and the topic was books. Are we done? Is it over? And if your name is Amos Oz, David Grossman, you know, with their 5 names like that, Abi Yoshua, then you can still sell your books easily. And if you're David Ehrlich or anybody else who's not in that first, in the 10 top club, nobody's interested. It's a very difficult thing. I've been really trying hard, and I haven't given myself any. בעברית אומרים, לא נתתי לעצמי הנחה. I haven't given myself a discount. זה עובד באנגלית? Does this work in English?
A break.
I haven't given myself a break. It's like the thing I hate most in the world is to do public speaking. Can you tell? But I told myself about 30 years ago, I want to be a writer. I have to be doing this, right? So also about publishing, I have to be knocking on these people's doors. I have to be. I'm not sure whether it was Hemingway or somebody like that, but a very well known in my world as a writer is you have to put up on your wall all the refusal letters you get. Kafka got 40. And he's been doing pretty well, Kafka. So you know, don't let those refusal letters and everything else stop you. And who knows, maybe you'll get acknowledged by the time you're dead. כן, בבקשה. איך קוראים לך?
Mira.
מירה.
What stops you, what stops you from trying to develop a short story into a novel? I mean, it is an art form, and I agree with you, it's underappreciated. But as a reader, I often get frustrated, like I want to know like the motivation of the character, and I want to have more of an engagement with the character and how he got to be that way. So I'm curious, as a writer, why do you have you taken this talent to go to a different level of depth?
It's a great question. The question is, what stops you from developing this into a full-fledged novel? And the answer is, if you can do it in one page, if you can do it in 3 paragraphs, why would you make it into a 300 pages long, tiring, whatever?
Because your name is Dostoevsky.
Deep down, my art is to take something very, very, very concise and make it as concise as possible. I mean, I find it extremely rewarding from an artistic point of view to have something be, to me it's the real thing. But you don't need, I feel I don't need more than 3 paragraphs to give you a full scope of what I meant. The Yarok, and let me tell you, if I may, a story behind the story. I always love the stories behind the story. 4 or 5 years ago, I was a writer in residence at Portland State University. And they gave me a great compliment. There is a Jewish theater something in Portland, and they wanted to produce a play based on my stories, and it's the greatest compliment. It was a wonderful event. They produced a beautiful play, and then they said to me, there is a troupe from a theater group from Germany. They're coming here. We're gonna perform something with them in a big plaza in town. Are you willing for your Yarok Green Island story to be, which was one of their items in their play, are you willing for this to be in that big show? I said, of course, And to make a long story short, it turned out they never actually invited me for the actual play, which was kind of strange. And when I learned about it the following day, it turned out they did some political thing about how awful walls are in the world, like the German wall. Yarok became one more example of how awful regimes like Israel are, harming world peace by, They never asked me. They never asked me whether my story and the play they had produced from it was an example of how awful regimes, איך אומרים, משפילים, הורגים את זכויות אדם, kill human rights, etc., etc. You know what I mean. So, as a writer, you're very used, like if you're lucky, somebody notices your work, but then it turns out they might have a totally different interpretation, and I can tell you, even though, believe me, I'm as leftist Israeli as they come, but it's so annoying as an artist to realize that your art has been mobilized as a political means for somebody else. Had they asked me, maybe I would have had some way of to have an 85-year-old mother who's still there and kicking, let alone a father who's 90 and still tells me very strongly, powerfully what he thinks of my art. My mom, when my first book in Hebrew, הבקרים של שלישי וחמישי, came out some 15 years ago, can you believe my mom said to me, אני לא אוהבת סיפורים קצרים, אני אוהבת רומן, אני אוהבת סיפור Nobody loves short stories, even my mother.
And does she like your story?
Does she like my stories? I don't know. She never responded. I gave her the book. She said she didn't like likes short stories. Nobody likes short stories.
We like short stories over here.
Good. So I want to read for you last short story, and if you have any more questions, and if I have time, I'll be happy to answer. So when my first book came out, I'll tell you two things about my first book. It came out with Yael Unterman, which is a not bad Israeli publisher. But since a lot of the stories were on a gay theme, they insisted on having a cover which was some sort of a shadowy, dark, gay something. And I couldn't really protest against it. It's a short version. Here's where I did win. I insisted on having a short story on the back because, as I just confessed to you, I just love the short story. So here's my short story, and I'll read it for you since I know I don't have much time. Just in English. It's called Keeping Kosher, Kashrut. The second time that Neil and I did the weekly shopping in the supermarket together, I realized that without saying so, we had become a couple. It was then that the woman from the cheese section asked what our connection was. I don't know what she had in mind when she asked that. Neil pulled himself together first. He's my brother. She smiled. How nice! I would have never been able to tell. You don't look alike at all. Well, we have different fathers because Mom got divorced, I said. So she threw in another piece of cheddar cheese. The following week, he told her that our parents lived abroad. And another time, when we bought some fancy French cheese for our anniversary, he shared with her that our folks were coming for a visit. I hate him when he does this. With the woman from the meat section, he's also connected. To her, he said, because she too had asked, he's my uncle. Such a young uncle, she wondered. The meat and the dairy are not so far apart at our supermarkets. And I worry that someday the two women might meet up and compare what they know about us. I'd like to live in a place where everybody knows the same thing about me, and it doesn't make any difference to them. And in the meantime, I let him do the weekly shopping on his own. He buys, I cook, he tells them stories, and in the end, I also cook up the stories. So Shilshom.
Sorry. I know that Rafi wanted to ask a question. Sorry.
No, I just had a quick question.
Please.
I was curious about passing on the right and passing on the left. Does that allude to your leftist?
The question is about passing on the right, passing on the left. I was very privileged in my life to have been close to poet Yehuda Amichai. And I was at his place in Yamin Moshe when he got a phone call from young students who wasn't even bat mitzvah yet, I think, who said to him, my teacher said I should write an essay about your ballads. הבלדות שלך. ballads. ballads? Yeah. אז עמיחי אמר לה, אבל אני לא כותב בלדות. Michal said, I don't write any ballads. Ballads? So she said, but my teacher said you did. So, there is room for interpretation. I don't even remember what my state of mind was when I wrote this. But yes, indeed, to me it's a very, very Israeli story, because don't we live like cockroaches in a place which is so intense and condensed and right, left, religious, non-religious. We're stuck together in the same boat, and as much as we hate each other more than anything in the world, more than we hate our neighbors often, we're here together, and it's my biggest conviction in the world, and I try to perform it in some ways in my bookstore cafe Tmol Shilshom. You know, the biggest mitzvah for us is to somehow get together. I don't know what we're supposed to do together, but we're together in the same boat. And this guy who's past this other guy on the left and right, and this, like, it's such an Israeli thing to first have the fight and eventually have the hug. And apparently we're doomed to be working with each other that way, and let's not forget it. As much as we struggle, as much as we sometimes can't take each other, we're here together, and we're here to stay, is my answer.
It seems to me, I enjoyed your stories very much, very much. It seems to me that Edgar Keret has influenced your writing in some way. Is that possible?
Or the other way around.
That I'm inspired by Keret?
Yeah, it seems to be like there's some similarities.
You know, one thing about Edgar Keret is the only Israeli writer of short stories who's successful. Not so much successful that the first time I saw him, I hosted him in Tmol Shilshom many years ago. He had a Polish TV crew running after him because they came here for 3 days to do a special on him. Like, he's extremely successful, and I'm very happy for him. But I'm very jealous at the same time. And no other writer of short stories, including myself, has come anywhere near it. So it's a very difficult and frustrating thing to be writing short stories. What I try to do, which I don't think Edgar tries to do so much, Edgar has this unbelievable, genius way of throwing in so much humor and what I call fireworks. Each of his short stories, and I very much recommend to you, if you don't know Edgar Keret, to buy his book tomorrow morning. He has all this magic in his books, which maybe I don't. What I do try to have is I try at the same time to be emotional. I try to really relate to my characters, identify with them, and have compassion for them. Because more than anything in the world, I feel for people, and here is where my stories come from. You know, Keeping Kosher, the story I've just read for you, is based on my own experience with my ex-boyfriend Neil. I reversed roles, like in my story, he was the older, I was the younger. In real life, he was 19 years younger than I was. He still is. At this point of life, and this is my ending, we're both, even though we've been exes for 10 years, we're still closest friends. He's been living with his boyfriend for 10 years. They have had a girl who's now 1 year old, a baby, through a surrogate mother in the States. I'm the lucky and extremely proud father of twins who are 7 years old, whom I've had with a co-parent, a woman who didn't get married but thought at the age of 40 that maybe kids first and marriage later. And you know, I've been lucky twice in my life as a gay man. Once I've been on the bandwagon with the gay lib in Israel, and I've been able to be out as a gay man, which doesn't go without saying. When I came out of the closet, it was impossible, really, to be out and have a normal life. And I've been lucky to be one of the people in Jerusalem, maybe, who made this possible. And then, 20 years later, I was lucky again to be dragging at the back of a new bandwagon, which was about being gay but having kids. It's a long story, we don't have time for that now, but is there a bigger luck than being a father? I have twins, a boy and a girl, and it's possible to be a gay father in this country without hiding it anywhere, without living a life of shekel, of lie. But this is all a different story. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank Deena and to wish you good luck with your events. I think you're doing an amazing job for cultural life in Jerusalem. תודה רבה. והרבה הרבה הצלחה לגילה. מה שלחתי לגילה? סליחה שאני צריך ללכת. Enjoy.
Stand in front of the person I'm Hi, parents. Actually, I would like to take an opportunity to thank my parents for coming and supporting me with everything. And they're so cute sitting there, and they're really wonderful too. So, yes. So next, I'm going to introduce what's her name again? Debbie Herman. Debbie Herman. Oh, גילה, אפשר לסגור את המוזיקה לגמרי? אין בעיה, תודה. I'd like to introduce Debbie Herman. The reason we sort of look alike is because we actually are roommates, or flatmates. So we know each other. I know her a little. Anyways, so Debbie Herman is a children's author, and she's going to be talking about her book, Carla's Sandwich. And what I want to say about her, because I'm introducing each person in a personal way, is that Debbie is a great person to hang around with if you are a creative person, because she never stops creating and thinking outside of the box, and it's really fun to be around somebody who also can't stop, period. Debbie.
So, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear, at least can you hear me over there? Yeah. So, like David, I also write short stories, but a different type. I write kids stories. So I am going to read an excerpt from page 4.
Can everybody hear?
What'd you say?
Yeah.
Okay. So my joke was, and I'm going to read an excerpt from page 4. However, there's no need to read an excerpt because the whole book takes about 8 minutes. Okay, Carla's Sandwich. Carla brought, this might remind you of kindergarten, so if you don't mind, but go back to those days. Carla brought weird sandwiches to school. Buster noticed it first. He was sitting next to Carla at lunch one Monday. Ew, what are you eating? Buster asked. It's all green and slimy. It's an olive pickle and green bean sandwich, said Carla. I made it myself. Would you like some? I want extra. No way, said Buster, pinching his nose. That's gross. It's not gross, said Carla. It's different. I like to be different. It's not different, said Buster. It's gross. He went to sit next to Leslie instead. On Tuesday, Carla's sandwich was long, with something yellow and white oozing out the sides. What in the world is that? asked Leslie. It's my banana cottage cheese delight, said Carla, tasty toasted baguette. Bananas and cottage cheese? asked Leslie, sticking out her tongue. That's disgusting. It's not disgusting, said Carla. It's creative. It's disgusting, said Leslie, and she went to sit next to Nadine instead. On Wednesday, Carla's sandwich was orange and brown and lumpy. It crunched when she bit into it. Alex and Nadine, who was sitting next to her now. What is that? I call it Carla's Crunch, said Carla. It's peanut butter, crackers, and cheddar cheese, and a lovely pita bread. I brought extra. Would you like some? No way, said Nadine, scrunching his face. That's sick. It's not sick, said Carla. It's unique. It's sick, said Nadine, and he went to sit next to Marcus instead. On Thursday, Carla brought a chopped liver, potato chip, and cucumber sandwich. On Friday, she brought a sardine and mustard sandwich with sunflower seeds. By Monday, no one wanted to sit next to Carla, so she ate by herself. At the end of the day, Miss Pimento made an announcement. Tomorrow we will have a picnic lunch. Tomorrow we will have a picnic. Hooray, everyone shouted. A picnic, yippee! The next day, when the lunch bell rang, the kids ran to get their picnic lunches. I have peanut butter and jelly, Nady announced to the class. I have bologna, said Leslie. Tuna, called Buster. Hey, Carla, what do you have? Carla didn't answer. It's probably a ketchup, spinach, and jelly bean sandwich, joked Buster. He and Leslie howled. So did Nady. It is not, said Carla. Let's have some quiet in here, said Miss Pimento, or we won't be able to have our picnic. The class was suddenly silent. Then the children followed Miss Pimento 2 by 2 down the hall, out the door, and down the block to the park. All right, everyone, said Miss Pimento, find a place to sit and bon appetit. Carla took a bite of her sandwich. Yuck, said Buster, pointing at Carla's lunch. What is that, a worm sandwich? For your information, said Carla, it's a lettuce, tomato, raisin, bean sprout, pretzel and mayonnaise sandwich. I call it the Combo Deluxe. It looks more like a Wormbo Deluxe, teased Buster. Leslie and Nady burst out laughing. Buster rummaged through his knapsack. Uh-oh, he said quietly. He rummaged some more. Uh-oh, he said again. He dumped everything out of his bag. I can't believe it, Buster said sadly. I forgot my sandwich. That's awful, said Leslie, biting into her bologna sandwich. A real bummer, said Nady, chomping on his peanut butter and jelly. Soon everyone was eating. Everyone except Buster. Carla looked at Buster. She looked at her sandwich. She looked back at Buster. You can have one of mine, she offered. I brought extra. Some kids snickered. No thanks, said Buster glumly. I'm not that desperate. Doris ate her egg salad sandwich and Rufus ate his tuna. Herbert ate his salmon salad sandwich and Barbara ate her turkey. Buster's mouth began to water. Buster looked at Carla's sandwich. Maybe bean sprouts aren't so bad, he thought. It's really quite delicious, said Carla, catching Buster's glance. Buster quickly turned away. Susan ate her corned beef sandwich, and Harris munched his taco. Fabio ate his chicken sandwich, and Gordon ate his meatloaf. Buster was growing hungrier by the minute, and his stomach growled loudly. Raisins are kind of fun, he thought, and who doesn't like pretzels? Marcus ate his cheese sandwich, and Darcy ate her bagel. Buster eyed Carla's sandwich again. You don't know what you're missing, Carla sang out. Buster couldn't take it anymore. He looked around. Everyone was busy eating. No one was watching him. Okay, he whispered to Carla. Okay, what? asked Carla. Okay, can I have one? He whispered again. Can you have one what? asked Carla. Buster blurted impatiently, can I please have one of your sandwiches? Everyone looked up. Carla smiled and handed Buster a Combo Deluxe. Buster examined the lettuce, tomato, raisin, bean sprout, pretzels, and mayonnaise sandwich carefully. He looked at Leslie, then Nady, then Carla, and then he took a very small bite. All eyes were watching as he chewed and swallowed. Well, asked Leslie impatiently. Well, asked Nady. Buster didn't say anything. He looked at everyone and took another bite, and another, and another. I can't believe he's eating it, said Nady in disgust. What does it taste like, Buster asked Leslie. Is it gross? Buster didn't answer. He was too busy eating. When the last bite was gone, Buster licked his fingers and smacked his lips. Yum, he said. That was the best sandwich I ever ate. It was? asked Nady in horror. It was? asked Leslie in dismay. It was, said Buster, smiling at Carla. Carla beamed. I bet you all enjoy the Combo Deluxe, said Carla. Who would like to try some? Slowly, Leslie raised her hand. Then Nady raised his. Then Darcy, Susan, Rufus, and Fabio. Soon all the kids had their hands up and hands in the air. Carla took her last sandwich, broke it into small pieces, and handed them out to everyone. Wow, said Leslie, tasting her piece. This is terrific. Yeah, said Nady, it tastes great. Tomorrow I'm going to bring a creative sandwich too, said Leslie. Maybe it'll be a mustard sandwich with baked beans and french fries. What do you think of that, Carla? Sounds good, said Carla, and it's definitely creative. I'll bring a spaghetti and soy sauce sandwich, said Buster, as he sat down next to Carla. Yum, said Carla and Leslie together. I don't know what I'm bringing yet, said Nady, but it'll be unique. The next day, everyone in Miss Pimento's class brought an unusual sandwich to school. There was an asparagus and salad dressing sandwich, a pistachio and tangerine sandwich, even a pizza sandwich. What did you bring today, Carla? Asked Buster. I'm not telling, said Carla. You'll have to wait until lunchtime. The morning seemed to last forever. But finally, the lunch bell rang. While Buster was munching away on his spaghetti and soy sauce sandwich, he glanced over at Carla. This time, her sandwich was not green, it was not slimy or lumpy, and nothing was moving out of the sides. So, what kind of sandwich is that? Buster asked. Yeah, Carla, said Leslie. What's inside? Nate looked at Carla, looking for an answer. Well, said Carla, today I have peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter and jelly? Asked Buster in disbelief. Peanut butter and jelly? Leslie and Nate asked together. Peanut butter and jelly, said Carla, biting into her sandwich. I like to be different. How I got into writing, and basically it was the most natural thing because my mother is a children's book author. I really literally grew up with her. In fact, I remember she'd be typing on her typewriter because that's pre-computers. And whenever she would have, let's say, a new chapter in her book that she got a new chapter, she would gather and say, "Okay, kids, want to hear the next chapter?" In my story, and we'd sit down and she would read to us her chapter, the new chapter from her manuscript. And we always loved it. And she would also include us. She would say, like, Anita, what could be the character's name? The character, what could be the name? Or what should happen next in the story? Hello? And it was fun because we got to participate, and sometimes she would take our ideas. And also it was just very inspiring. In fact, when I was little, I was so little, I couldn't read or write yet. I was probably about 3. I would dictate stories to my mom, and she would type it on the computer, on the typewriter for me, and write it out. And I remember thinking, wow, this is such a long, wonderful story. And I looked at it, a few years later, and it was not very long at all. It really wasn't that good. But, and other things she did, she'd take us to the library, we got to pick out whatever books we wanted. And the funny thing is that she tells us, that I don't remember, but she says that when she would sit down to read us a book, before she started, we would say, "Who's the publisher?" Who illustrated the book. And she thought it was really funny because it's not typically big as a 4-year-old would ask. So it was a natural move for me to write books, and especially kids' books. And I actually had my mom to thank because when she started writing, there weren't so many authors out there. It wasn't like it is now. And there was no internet to figure out how to do it. So she was really a pioneer in the field. She figured out what to do, who to send things to, how. So by the time I came around, I already knew the process. Now, some people ask me how I got the idea for Carla's sandwich. And the truth is, I couldn't tell you. It just kind of popped into my head. But if I were to try and figure out, I could probably figure out what went into it. So first of all, I always appreciate people that kind of do their own thing and aren't so worried about what other people are going to think. And I always like, especially if I read kids' books, I like when there's a character that's not your typical cool kid, but just a kid who's a little quirky, a little different. It always draws me. So that's how I thought of Carla. And and in terms of sandwiches, I thought of that, I'm pretty sure, because of the fact that making fun of lunches, kids' lunches in school is very universal, kind of transcends time and place. I remember as a kid, my friend Tree used to bring cream cheese sandwiches with peanuts inside, and everybody was like, ew, gross. And my niece, when she came to Israel, she was in first grade, she brought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to school, and in Israel it's not such a thing, and she decided after that day never to do that again. It was just fun. And when I did some teaching, also I experienced that with kids, making fun of other kids' lunches. So that's something that I think kids of every generation can relate to. The last two things I thought I'd talk about is two questions people often ask me. So one is, how do I get ideas for stories? And the second is, how do I know what kids like? Do I interview kids? Like, how do I know what they're interested in? So first of all, in terms of ideas, that to me is actually a funny question because anything, there are too many ideas. In my family, I guess because my mom's a children's book writer, the most common refrain in my family is, oh, that's a good idea for a book. And you read something in the news, oh, that's a good idea for a book. Somebody tells you something funny that happened, oh, that's a good idea for a book. So sometimes it's like too many ideas, choose one, just write it. But basically, what I'm saying is that ideas really are all around us, really everywhere, and you just have to keep your eyes open for them, like keep your antennas up. Kind of like if you're looking for a new car and you think you might get a certain car, and then all of a sudden you're seeing that car all over the place. It's not that that day there are so many more cars like that on the street, it's just you're noticing them. So the same thing with ideas. It's like train yourself to look around and to think, oh yeah, that's an idea, that's an idea. And then lastly, how do I know what kids like? People will say like, yeah, but how do you figure out what they want? And I say it's not a matter of figuring out what they want. You don't look out as an adult and decide what the kids want. You look inward and you think you need to remember yourself as a child. Remember your childhood. What did you like? What didn't you like? What was funny? What were you so proud of? If you remember your own childhood, then you can write for kids. Because even if the external trappings are different in terms of how kids spend their time now as opposed to then, a kid is still a kid. And so that's what it is. So it's like stop being an adult for a second, be a kid, and then you'll be able to write for kids. So that's basically it. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but if you do, have to
Did you publish that here or in the United States?
Interesting because it's actually an Israeli company, but they publish the books and they sell them in America. So it's an American market, but it happens to be that the company is in Tel Aviv.
Wow.
Yes.
This was a great book to read in a restaurant. I noticed that all the sandwiches are kosher.
Yes.
I can respond to that if you want. I was going to ask
Yeah.
you
Oh, no, you can do that.
I'm not very familiar with children's books, but I've seen a few of the modern ones, and there seems to be a trend to giving over these very important social messages about how it's okay to be different, and people are different from each other, and we need to accept them. The whole pluralism thing, the PC thing. Your book does seem to fit into that on some level. We need to accept the different kids. What do you think about that?
Well, two things. First of all, I definitely had a message in there because it's a strong thing I really believe in. But I wouldn't say that's, what's interesting to me is the picture book market now is so different than it used to be. And like I said, I saw when my mom was writing years ago and now. I wouldn't even say that that's true. With your general publishing companies, what they want are books that don't even tell stories, such as very short, quick books. I don't know if you read the book, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. It's basically just a few words, and it's trying to convince kids not to let the pigeon drive the bus, and the pigeon tries to convince the kids to let them drive the bus. So it's very interactive.
What's the deep message?
Then there's no and that's what I say. A Brooklyn Carless sandwich. Most companies now wouldn't want to publish it because it's too long. Because for a variety of reasons, they're not really, most publishing companies, at least the big ones, are not publishing long stories for whatever reason. So it needs to be like very short, very short, very short. So I think a lot of them, sometimes they are on the other side. They don't have any message. And the truth is, I don't think that a story is a message. This happened to happen. That's, I guess, what I think. But I don't believe every story has to have a message. In terms of kosher sandwiches, I couldn't even put like milks and flakes together. I couldn't. But also, since it was published in Israel, there was always thought that maybe even from the publisher, she said, keep the sandwiches kosher. She spoke to the illustrator, keep them kosher, in case we make an Israeli translation, do an Israeli translation. Everyone it was actually translated into Chinese and Spanish, but not yes.
Can we buy it? Can you sign it?
Sure, love to.
At the end, like after the third author, so then there will be time to go up to the authors and speak to them by book.
Yes.
Keeping bologna, what's that?
Oh, bologna?
Salami. Yes, so bologna sandwiches, that was in one of your story.
Yeah.
What is that?
What is bologna?
Salami with different, not me, you get to say it now. I don't know what else to call. What do you call, where are you from? What do you call in Australia?
Salami. Usually call it bush.
Well, there's something a little different. I don't know the difference.
It's kosher. You say we also got with Mama Spindak as a writer. What do you think about him and did he influence you anyway?
I love him because I love his rock. I love him and I grew up with his, what's it called? Chicken soup. It's a book of poems about each month. So I memorized January, so that's my so I love him, I really like him. I can't say he influenced me, because the truth is I didn't really read a lot of his writings, but I do love his art, and I always, thought he was very cool. But he wouldn't be one author that I would say I necessarily was influenced by. But then again, you read a lot of things, and you're probably influenced by a combination of things, but I do definitely like his work. Yes.
There's a famous children's book called The Tiger Who Came to Tea.
The what?
The Tiger Who Came to Tea.
Okay.
You haven't heard of it? Alright, don't worry about it.
English.
Maybe it's in England, so alright. No, it's about, it's basically the tiger ate everything in the house. It's to do with like Nazi Germany, like, it's the meaning behind the book. It's quite like famous, maybe it's just an English thing. Sorry, I was born in England, so I know it's like...
No, it's perfect.
We have to apologize about that.
Yes.
We already forgave you.
Did any teacher object to your book?
No, they all really But I love reading kids. I love reading you guys. I like the reactions. But I love reading kids because when I read them, they all go, I think those kids could relate to it. I think the pictures are amazing. I did not do them. There's an illustrator in California named Sheila Bailey. She did the illustrations. But I've only gotten positive feedback about it.
When did you publish?
This was published in 2004, actually.
Okay, we'll take two more questions.
Isn't the story a bit too long for kids?
Okay,
Now, because people are, companies are publishing shorter books, people are kind of, maybe kids are losing patience, but they don't, if I sit and read this to kids, they listen.
One setting.
It's not one setting. If a kid's 2, it's going to be too long for them.
Yeah.
Or even 3, too long. Well, it depends on the kid though. Once you get to 4, 5, 6, 7, not too long at all.
Also, like, kids can need books reread to them a million times, so it's actually good that it's a little bit longer. But otherwise, the adult is reading such short books so many times.
Maybe so.
Is that what?
Sure, yeah.
Have you eaten all those that made it eaten all the
People ask me that. I haven't eaten any more. I have an obligation to try it. I should have a sandwich like that. I was going to have to book him out. I was going to have a sandwich signing party, but it never ended up happening. But I'll tell you what's funny, because one of the worst sandwiches I think is a sardine and mustard sandwich. But I spoke at a school, and then afterwards the kids were supposed to talk about what their favorite sandwiches were, and one kid loved the mustard and the sardines. So to each his own.
Yeah, what's the best reaction you've gotten from kids?
Good question. Oh, I don't, okay, like, hang on. First of all, what do I think of? Okay, I can't think right now, but I do remember something I didn't expect, okay? Best reactions are just like kids laughing, that sort of thing. Or one kid was 3 and he memorized the book. That was good. I'll tell you what a great compliment is. I've heard from a few parents where their kids, when they decide they want to make something like a strange sandwich, they say, oh, could I make a carlin sandwich? Now I'm going to make a carlin sandwich. Yeah. So the first time I heard it, they're like, oh, that's so nice, make a carlin sandwich. And then I heard from a few more people, I thought, that's really cool. But what's funny is Lisa, who's here, has a niece, and she made a comment they never ever got before. And she, what was it? She wanted to know Wait, what was it about how she sat like this? How she
But she
Oh,
learned how to sit
right.
like
She learned how to sit like this because she was inspired by a book. She wanted to learn how do you do that? How do you sit?
Tell the illustrators in California.
She learned that. That's the most creative comment I ever got.
And most of them are unmarried, most of them are kind of modern Orthodox, and so that's the basic subject. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I came to write, and then I'll read you a couple of excerpts. So writing is just, not just, but it's a talent that's been in me since I was very little, and I think I started writing my first book when I was 9. There was some little pisher 9-year-old girl in England who published a book about some family of fruit, and I really wanted to compete with her. So I wrote my book, which was called Bracelet Magic, and I sent it off to a publisher, and of course they didn't accept it. And then when I was 14, I wrote Come On Wally, and that wasn't accepted either. It was sent back with fish and chip stains all over it. And that was the sad story of my childhood writing career. When I came to Israel when I was 18, I got very serious, went to yeshiva, forgot all about writing and fiction for about 10 years, until one morning I woke up going, I have to start reading fiction again and whatever. I ended up writing a first book, which wasn't really even my idea. It was, those of you who know, a biography of Nechama Leibowitz, and it was the publisher's idea, and I spent 10 years on that. So it was great. It was a really wonderful project. I'm very privileged to have done it. But having published now my second book, a book of fiction, I feel like I've expressed more kind of what's inside me rather than describe the life of someone else. This book emerged from the Shandy Rudolph Creative Writing Program at Bar-Ilan University. It's a master's degree in English, creative writing, and Shandy Rudolph set it up. She was a young woman with a vision. Unfortunately, she passed away in my second year, but I really wrote my thanks to her in the front of the book, because the book emerged from the creative writing program. And I had not written really short stories before. My form was more the novel, but they said, bring in stories so that we can workshop them together. So I did. And we had this wacky professor who is a true writer because he's completely eccentric, and his name's Mark Mirsky. They brought him over from America. And he said to us one day, I want you to write what you're scared to write about. So we're like, okay. So I went home and thought, what am I scared to write about? And what I was scared to write about was being a single in Katamon. That was scary. That was my life. And so when we came back, one guy had written about his father's death and whatever, and I was like, here's a story about a single in Katamon, And essentially writing about things which are painful, which are real and painful. And that's, I think, what touches people, is when you come out of the closet and write about things that are real. Assuming you're not writing sci-fi or whatever. But so that, I think, is I really think that Mark Mirsky sparked me on this journey of creating this collection. And I wrote another story, and more characters showed up, and eventually I had a collection. I got an agent. She wasn't really able to do anything with it, unfortunately, so she dropped me and I dropped her. And then I spent 2 years looking for a publisher. And finally, by dint of Googling something like Jewish women's writing, I found a woman in St. Paul, Missouri, Minnesota, somewhere in America. And I was getting mixed up. And her name's Shana Gallion, and Yotzeret Publishing, and she said to me, I like your stories and I want to publish them, which was amazing, and I'm very grateful for that. So how do these stories come about? Well, I'm the kind of writer who mostly has no idea where the story's going to end up, just has a fragment of a character or a storyline. You kind of have to trust the process. So some stories, the minority of stories, were born whole in my head. Those of you who read my book, the story about the woman standing in shul and innocently shaking her lulav when all of a sudden some etrogs start whizzing over the mechitza, that was a story that was born whole in my head one Sukkot. And with most of them, though, you just get a character or a metaphor, and then you start the story and you wait to see where it's going. Or sometimes you see something in real life and you say to yourself, wow, this real life thing that just happened to me would make a fantastic story. So essentially what we do is we steal stories from the great author in the sky, okay, who helps us write. And I really believe that. My writing process is definitely influenced by God. So I should have dedicated the book to him. For example, my story Glove, you see that there's a picture on the front of a glove, a red glove. So I'm going to read you an excerpt and then I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory of writing it so that you understand how these stories come about. So I'm now looking for page, okay, glove, okay, glove. Karen sits in the kitchen, eating a carrot and averting her eyes from the history textbooks piled on the table. Crusaders, Provençal exegetes, disputations. Right now, they are about as important to her as the Hebrew idiom colourfully had it, as the garlic peel. Her mind seems to be elsewhere, so she sets out to look for it, outside. Children in bubble hats and stripy socks streak past laughing. Head down, hands in pockets for warmth, she kicks at the slush until her boots are soaked, realising belatedly that she should not have worn those cheap fur boots from China. An impulse buy from one of the many shoe shops along Jaffa Street. Real boots, by the way, I have them at home. Permeable to water, they've quickly transformed into two sodden, leaden clods, slip-slapping around her ankles. The snow has fallen rather high for Jerusalem. She cannot remember the last time it chilled the flesh of her calves like this. Something lies dark and quiet on a clean mound of snow. She picks it up. A red glove with a flower-shaped button above the thumb and an elasticated corduroy sleeve extending almost to the wrist. Unique and evidently of high quality. The found object dangling in her hand, Karen wanders aimlessly, solitary for another few minutes until the soggy boots make it impossible to advance without kicking out her feet in an awkward, sloshy goose step. She heads for home and passes a tabby cat sitting on a wall, its tart green eyes unblinking as its head swivels to follow her ungainly walk. Nowadays, whenever she passes a cat, she involuntarily flinches, recalling Beau's words on their last day together, prelude to breakup. You know, I've noticed that you stare into the eyes of every street cat you meet. I do? She had responded absently, her attention caught by a poster advertising a lecture at Pardes. Yes, as if you were looking for something. The shift in his tone had caught her attention now. Something was about to happen. She turned abruptly and searched his face. Looking for what? He avoided her eye. Answers, companionship, I don't know. And that's the problem. That I stare at cats? That's the problem? She was trying to ignore the fact that he had not said a problem, but the problem. Two words with a steely ring, like a guillotine plummeting into a wooden block. The thing is, what I'm trying to say is, he mumbled something out of her hearing, her breath backlogged in her throat. Yes? It's not enough for you, being with me. There's some lonely thing in you, way beyond where I can reach. I'm not deep enough for you. I don't really get you the way you deserve. That's not true. That's a lie. You get me plenty. Her hand, reaching out to slap him into some kind of sense, had frozen midway and wilted back to her side. It doesn't feel that way. You're always somewhere behind a wall and I can't break it down. We're back to that again, are we? What again? You want me to be mushy, just like your other girlfriends. Some kitsch Hollywood chick overflowing with compliments, hanging on your arm all lovey-dovey. I've told you, I'm British. We don't do that. Doesn't mean you and I don't have a good relationship, because we do, we definitely do. Now she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. There was a silence. All the blood had drained out of his face. A really good relationship, she added, digging another inch of her own grave. There was a very long pause. Look, I just don't think this is going to work, he had concluded sadly. And there was clearly nothing more for her to say. Super. You're breaking up with me because I'm lonely. That'll help a lot. Thanks. So actually, this was my last written story. I hadn't even intended it to go into the collection, but it was published on a site, a very nice site called jewishfiction.net, that every month comes out with, 12 or 14 free stories from fantastic Jewish authors, some top names of Israeli Jewish authors. You should check it out, jewishfiction.net. And it got some nice feedback. I posted on Facebook, friends said this is really interesting, and so I decided to squeeze it into the collection at the last minute because it was still being edited after 3 years. So things sometimes come up as a surprise. And how did that come to it? I think that I just started noticing. Has this ever happened to you? You just find one glove sitting on the snow, like whatever. So anyway, and I just got to thinking, wow, think about the person who lost it and how annoyed they must be feeling right now and how I can't do anything with it and I can't get it back to them. And then I began to think about this one glove as a kind of a symbol, right, for singleness. And in Bar Ilan, one of the nicest things, for me anyway, that they taught me in the program was this literary device where you use an object or a scene to transmit the emotions of the protagonist without actually saying it explicitly. And so when you see this woman, Karen, picking up these gloves, and she goes home and she hangs them on a washing line that's actually up in her room. And she has this collection of lonely gloves that she's found. You really kind of, hopefully, if I've done my work properly, you feel her pain without it being explicitly said. And it comes through with the metaphor. So, by the way, one time after I gave this talk, a friend went home and for the first time in her life saw a lone glove on the street. So you guys keep your eyes peeled and I want reports, okay? Anyway, and maybe we could actually do Hashavat Avodah. We could set up a whole club in Jerusalem of returning gloves and things like that. So, now, you're probably wondering, because this is what a lot of people ask me, they say, are these stories true or are they fiction? And I say to them, well, they're fiction, right? Okay, why do I do that? Because, of course, many of the materials in the stories are also from my own life. And I'm not hiding that. It would be stupid to hide it. It's about obvious as the nose on your face. So, my characters, they teach Torah. They live in Katamon. They study in creative writing programs. They go on blind dates. They go internet dating. They make meals inviting only people with red hair. And I've done all those things, or in the case of the meal, plan to do them. I never managed to. They kept moving country, the redheads I wanted to invite. But when it comes to the actual details, thank God you have to realize that most of them were made up, okay? So I've done internet dating, but I never tried to send in as my primary photo a picture of a monkey. Or wrote a ridiculous description of myself based on Eshet Chayil, or strung up a washing line of gloves. So I just want that to be clear. Now, some other of my stories are based on things that happen to friends, even some of the more unbelievable elements. So, for example, a friend did actually go on a date with a rabbinical student who gave her a strawberry and said to her, "Feed me." So I was a little shocked, and that went straight into my first story. Another friend was riding in Tel Aviv on a completely empty bus, and a man got on and sat down in the seat next to her. So that actually happened, I have a story called The Ged of El Al, and I think that story started off as a fragment, and I think that actually I had written somewhere the God of El Al, and then I couldn't read my own handwriting, and it turned into the Ged of El Al, but there you go. So, and many of the stories I worked and reworked over the years, and if any of you here are writers, it's really important to leave your stories at the side and then come back to them a little bit later because your eyes are much fresher and you actually pick up on things that really need changing and you're able to do so. You might be surprised or not surprised to hear that in parts of my book also I'm kind of engaging in some ways with Bridget Jones's diary, especially in the story Cat a Monster. And the truth is, Helen Fielding, the author of Bridget Jones, she dealt with the topic of dating in a funny way, even though I think that you can also sense in her book the unhappiness of it coming through. And so I also have a number of very painful stories about singles. My mother said to me, my mother has been distributing my book amongst people of her generation, and she said to me, the last two people I gave your book to, one of them read it the whole way through, the others read half, and they both said it was sad. And I was like, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I wonder if Dostoevsky and Kafka also got that from them. Anyway, the thing is that, so I don't define my writing as chick lit. I wouldn't want it to be seen as chick lit, sort of light and frivolous and staying on the surface. I think light and frivolous is good, and I do have comedy in here, but I really don't want to see my book as that genre, and I hope that people don't. I will tell you that my publisher, after she said to me, I really like your stories, and then she said, the problem is that they always end in a downer. So I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, the girl never gets a guy. So I looked at my stories and I was like, she's right, she's right, she's right. That's really interesting. Why have I written a book about girls that never get the guy? Anyway, so she wanted me to change the endings and make it happy to please the punters, which means the customers in British. And I did not want to change any of the endings. I was very attached to the endings. So what did I do? I wrote a whole new story in which I found all the available men in my book, plus invented a couple, and plugged them all together with my female protagonists. So everybody got a guy, all except the feminist. She didn't get anybody. So I'm just going to read you now. Where's Deena? How much time do I have? Not very much, right? Oh, okay. All right. So let me read you. Fine.
The end of the evening.
Oh, the end of the evening. Okay. So let me read you. So basically, I have two mirror stories. One's called Sweet Dreamer, and one's called Cat a Monster. And both of them are about two friends, childhood friends, Raquel and Emma, who both try internet dating for the first time. And basically, you hear about the craziness of what happens to them when they start to internet date. So, because it's a little bit late, I might skip the Sweet Dreamer bit. Sweet Dreamer is the tragic story. It really gets very wild and absurd towards the end, and even though it's got humour in it, it's actually a tragedy. So I won't depress you by reading that one. I'll read Cat a Monster instead, because I love reading Cat a Monster. So we're going to read from... So I already read part of Cat a Monster at one of Deena's events. I can't read the part where Emma starts to go internet dating, even though it's hilarious. So instead I'm going to read to you from another part where she's already started the dating. She says, for example, she says, I see on the site that the J Singles cruise is almost sold out of inside cabins. I'm going to write to them and ask if perchance there are any outside cabins still available. Frankly, I'd settle for a bench in a lifeboat, or even a spot floating in the sea alongside the ship, tied around my waist by a thick rope. All the better to make a quick escape, I reckon. I have no interest in single cruises, except for Tom, and he ain't single right now. Tom, my love, I will wait forever. Okay, so that's just like one comment. Okay, now she says, oh, and another thing that infuriates me is that every second man writes in his profile that he's looking for an Eshet Chayil, open brackets, literally a woman of valor, referring to the superwoman from chapter 31 of Proverbs, who is traditionally praised every Friday night in a song before the meal, close brackets, open brackets. You get footnotes too in this blog, all part of the service, close brackets. Now, what does that mean? They want an Eshet Chayil. She doesn't exist. The whole thing's a myth, a metaphor. Look, even the first line proclaims, a woman of valor who can find. Answer, no one. She's a fantasy, duh. So, I decided to create a new profile of myself based on the woman of valor, to show these men what their ideal woman really looks like. Stay with me, peeps, and open your Bibles at Proverbs 31 if you don't know what the Eki thump I'm on about. Here's what I wrote. My day is busy. I get up at 4 a.m. and make breakfast for everyone. By 6 or 7, I've already planted a field or bought a vineyard or two. Then I might go to the gym in order to gird up my loins and make my arms strong. I also do arm stretching exercises with the poor people who show up at the gym. I really like to exercise in their company, as thus I feel both fit and rich. Then I travel to Eilat or the Lebanese border to buy my groceries. It's important to me to buy my food from as far away as possible. Now, boys, I'm a woman of means, and thus a good catch, mind. I have my own clothing business, so my afternoons are spent looking for wool and flax, or spinning, or making scarlet clothing for my family. I find it protects them from the snow.
But don't worry, I'm an old-fashioned gal, and I don't expect you to take any part in the running of the household. In our marriage, all you'll do all day is sit at the gates of the cities, or go visit old age homes. And though everyone will know that that is all you do, you will not be embarrassed at all. Seriously, because you will have such an amazing wife. And by the way, I should add that I'm not at all pretty or attractive. In fact, I'm just one level above hideous. Yeah, right. These religious boys, they're all Tosfos this and Shulchan Aruch that. But when it comes to the crunch, they all want a gorgeous babe if they can get her, just like any red-blooded male under the sun. So much for Eshet Chayil. Pa. Okay, so that's her Eshet Chayil piece. Alright, depending on demand, I can read you what is probably
The funniest part of Tmol, so it takes another few minutes. Some of you might be anxious to get away, so we will take a show of hands. And that side, is that okay? Or should I just stop? People are a little tired. All right, so you have to stop me, otherwise I just go on and on. Okay, so you know what? Question. So if you want to read Emma's game, Autobus, which is all about who can sit next to each other on the Israeli bus, you need to buy the book. How's that? That's a good plug, right? So, okay, so we'll just take a couple of minutes for questions. And I also was going to read a piece, which I won't read, about how exposing it is to write. And I actually have a piece in the book about how people write about things which they wouldn't discuss with people, but they write about them, like they make them public through a book. And it's weird because sometimes it's extremely personal things, but the fiction gives it like a fig leaf, like a veneer of privacy. Anyway, so yes, Deena.
In your book, stories also from friends of yours as well. Do you consult them before and let them know, or do you do it anonymously with that time?
I steal the bits. Actually, the truth is, it doesn't really belong to them. Those bits are also from the great author in the sky. I steal the bits, and of course I disguise them. None of my friends minded. There was one person upon whom I based a character, and I sent that person the story to read, and they responded and said, Yael, you've given me all the personality of a rolled up piece of cardboard, but if you want to, go ahead and publish it. Aside from that, I didn't feel the need because that's what authors do. We're like magpies. We steal little bits from your lives, right? And we don't ask your permission, and then we make tons and tons of money from them. Question.
What's like some really annoying things that people have said to you about your book? Considering it's, of course, I mean, from the perspective of it being, about being single, and then you are single, are they like, oh, you should have been out dating while you're...
No one said that, but, I'll tell you a couple of things. One friend, single guy from Katamon, said he stopped at page 2 because it was just too depressing for him. So that's okay, I can handle that. And so it's too close to home, and I actually understand that. I understand singles are split between those who read it and feel very, very validated, and those who find it just too close to home and painful, which I understand. A second thing that happened to me was I was being interviewed live on it was like the Lower East Side. There's a radio station, a Jewish radio station called the Nachum something. Yes, and I was being interviewed by a woman who has a show on Thursday mornings in New York. So she asked me all kinds of questions about the book, and I answered, even though it was very scary because it was live radio, whatever. And then at the end, she has a nice surprise question for me, and she says, well, she says, now I'm just thinking, you're going to have to excuse my American accent, it was like tends to Texas, but so she was actually from like the 5 towns, I can't do that accent. So she says, I'm just thinking there must be some matchmaker out there who's thinking, have I got a guy for this woman? So, she asked me basically if what I was looking for or what I was doing, and then she threw in that question, which is very typical New York, sort of, Yiddish mama type thing. And I looked at her and I just said to her, I don't know anything about you, but if I said to you, now listen, I know a man, and I'll tell you his age and what he does for a living, and now would you like to go out next Wednesday and spend an evening in semi-intimacy with this man? And she looked at me in like blank horror, and I said, no, well, neither would I. So I said to her, I'm just tired. And that was it. And I did not get any offers from any matchmakers in Brooklyn, so thank God I was saved. Saved Birkat Gomel. So, no, most of the time people have been... Most of the time, I received, thank God, a lot of positive feedback, and then, I have to tell you though, I did post this on Facebook. I popped into Goodreads, and I saw that one woman, bless her, had given me 5 words for my 9 years of work on this book, and the words were horrid, schmaltzy, and ends terribly. That was it. That was her review. So I actually posted that on Facebook and said, I'm not just posting positive reviews, look, and then everyone had to laugh at her expense, so I don't know what it is. But anyway, I don't know. I don't think it's schmaltzy, but maybe it's horrid. Any other questions from the audience?
One more question.
Shilshom.
Yeah, I haven't read the book yet, but I'm very, very excited about it. I bought it straight away when I saw you.
You did.
But I was curious, the book in some ways, you don't go, there's a lot of options for single religious women now. They're having children by themselves, they're maybe living with a boyfriend, even though they're doing things which are not by the book. But it seems to me this book is fairly conservative, you're sticking to the good girls who do the right thing, not us. Is that right?
You're making a good point that another friend of mine made, which she said, why don't you show some proactive women who are going out there and making their lives work for them in the way that they possibly can. So I do think that my women are struggling and trying. Going onto internet dating sites was a hard leap for them, it wasn't something that they felt like doing, it's very exposing, etc. I'll be honest with you, I did write a story about a woman who has a baby on her own, and I decided not to put it in because the nature of the story was such that it would embarrass somewhat women who've chosen to do that, and I felt like their lives and challenges are hard enough without me shining a spotlight on them in a particular way that would not be particularly flattering. So even though it's a good story, I decided that wasn't going in. But I think you're making a very good point, and who knows, maybe if I was to rewrite the whole thing now, there'd be a few other choices that people would be making.
We don't want you to rewrite, we want you to write the next book.
I don't think my next book's going to be on singles in Katamon. I really hope not. I've got a book that I'm starting to work on. It's non-fiction. I write in different genres, and so my next book will probably be something completely different. So maybe something to do with Jewish thought, etc. So we'll see. I mean, I love writing fiction. I would love to write another fiction book. And occasionally I do get an idea for a story, and then I don't know what to do with it because I don't really have a place now to put these stories that are trying to get born, and people keep saying to me now about different things in my life. They're like, oh, that would make a great story, or they tell me a story of theirs and they're like, wouldn't that make a great story? And I'm like, yeah, go write it. And they want me to write all their stories, and I just start a business, I'll write your stories kind of thing. So anyway, I want to thank Deena very much for organising this evening. And I'm sure she has some final words to say to you, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yael. That was great. Gila, את מוכנה? Okay. So we just have one more little thing that's going to happen in a second. But I just want to thank the authors so much. They were all wonderful, Debbie, and you can visit them virtually online in the programs. For a couple of them, there's links. And you can also go up to them afterwards and you can buy their books if you want, or just talk to them, whatever you like. Thank you again to everybody. I won't go through that again. And as you know, this is very new for me, planning these events, and I'm working really hard to grow it. And so I would really appreciate if you guys could email me or whatever, just your feedback. Either way, just so that I have a feel for how you guys enjoyed tonight, and maybe ideas that you have for future events. And don't forget that November 26th is the event at Tmol Shilshom. And today is Leslie's birthday. And so, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Leslie. Happy birthday to you. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.